I did a lot of intergenerational work about the women in my family, and you see the same patterns, the same behaviors. The people marry the same kind of people. They do the same kind of work. They end up in the same kind of relationships. It's very, very strange, but it's basically the same story that you're telling. Like, this is how it should be. This is how it is. Tradition, culture, whatever you want to call it. It's entrenched behavior patterns and ways of thinking. So once we start looking at how you think about things and what you believe is true and what learned as how you should be, we analyze those things and we actually redefine them. We kind of reprogram you to think in a different way that is more beneficial, more, serving the greater good instead of destroying you, because just living unconsciously, perpetuating those stories is just going to keep you stuck in that cycle.
Is it possible that somebody have understood this behavior, have studied it, and implement it, knowing that this is the way the people are going to react, and the people therefore react, and the system is sort of feeding on itself, like the African people therefore become like a kind of simulation in the game of another person, so that we are just like rats that are running around in a circle. But this is a game that somebody have designed for us. Is it possible that somebody is enjoying this suffering because that we are playing according to their rules?
Yeah, so a lot of times you find also people complaining about stuff, right? They just complain, and they don't actually do anything. They don't actually solve the problem, but they just want someone to listen to them complaining. And the thing is, you get comfortable there as well. So you don't really change things unless you're really uncomfortable and you can't live with it anymore. So even when you, for example, on the brink of burnout, you don't change your life until you actually have the burnout and you cannot function anymore. So when things get really uncomfortable, then you want to change, then you want to have a revolution, then you want to react. And sometimes it's a violent reaction. But on the other hand, if you are a conscious, reflective person who's in touch with yourself and you don't want to wait for that to happen in your life, you are constantly making changes about how you live and how you do things, and you do things intentionally, then those are two different ways of getting the change to happen. So I'm Zahara. I'm a futurist and a design coach. I work currently in the telecoms industry. I manage a design team where I coach business service UX designers that create new things in the world. But my background is really in psychology and anthropology and really creating new technologies. And I've been doing that for the past 20 some odd years. And I think over the years, I've seen a lot how the small things we create kind of add up to, more long-term problems that we have in the world. So we need to really change the way we create new technologies and how we implement and use them in the planet. So a lot of my work is around, becoming better, becoming more connected, and creating things in a more connected way.
We'd like to know you. So tell me, what do you remember of your infancy? Where were you born? So that is important for us.
So I'm from South Africa. I grew up there. I've lived there for most of my life. I just moved to Belgium last year, but previously I've been living in Durban, South Africa, and then I moved to Pretoria for about 10 years. Yeah, so that's my background. A lot of my childhood is, we've been through the transition of apartheid, and I had to see a lot of what that did to people in the community, and that affected me really, really greatly. I think a lot of my interest in psychology was around trauma and how that affected people and communities and what that did to them, and really dealing with intergenerational trauma. And that affects a lot of the work that I do and how I do the work that I do. Because its people being disconnected from themselves and from their communities and the work that they do and the things they create and the environment, which leads to so many social problems. And it's very difficult to solve that with the traditional Western mindset when it comes to treating mental illness or any kinds of problems like this, because they never have a holistic view of what's going on. So a lot of my studies were different things put together to kind of create a more balanced understanding of what actually was happening. So yeah, a lot of my childhood experiences really influenced where I am today and where I find myself in my work.
All right. Thank you for that. So currently you're staying in Benja, is that correct?
Yeah, currently.
Okay. So as you were growing up in South Africa, what do you think the world was going to be like, looking at yourself maybe in the future? What kind of dream do you have? That also is important for me.
Yeah, look, in South Africa, we always wanted things to be equal, just everybody, have the same opportunities that wasn't available to us growing up, because obviously because of the way things were structured and the laws and the way our society was deliberately designed. It wasn't equal. It wasn't created to be equal. It wasn't created for everybody. So we all wanted things to change. I don't think anybody had a clear vision of what the change should be or how it should be, because we didn't experience it in our lives. Um, so that is also the fundamental problem, right? About you not knowing what is possible. Um, so I wanted to really work in the space about creating, personal futures and narratives around, what the future means for people and how they want to go forward, and our collective futures as a country, as a society, as communities. And a lot of the problems I found is people didn't know what they didn't know, right? So a lot of the kids I worked with when I was teaching, they didn't even know about new technologies and they didn't know what was possible. They always kept things very small. So the vision of what the future could be for them was very limited. So for me personally, I try to get as many different experiences and learn about new things so I can expand my mind and my understanding of what's possible.
Thank you for that. I like when you said that. Not that I like to say the experience that you had relating to the apartheid, but that based on what have happened to you, you decide to embark on the journey that you are today because you are responding to the situation that you find around you. You are prescribed. Try to look at what have happened, how you can give a solution to that as it were. If you look at maybe the work of Viktor F. Frankl, for example, the man's search for meaning, Viktor F. Frankl was the Nazis' camp, but of course, he could have been thinking of just his death. Instead, what have happened to him led him to become one of the best psychologists in the world today that we know. I'm saying that to me that sometimes we're not able to change what happens to us, but how we react to that make a lot of difference. So when you say the apartheid had a strong effect on you or affected you, tell me about that. What do you mean in concrete terms?
So, I was very much an observer, always watching what people were doing and how they were acting. And I think also it's very much about the stories that we tell ourselves, right? So stories passed on from generation to generation, they've always been a part of our human interaction, right? This is how we learn about ourselves from the people around us, our parents, our families, our teachers. That's how we share our culture and educate the next generation. It helps them to become more human and to become part of the society. And in South Africa, we also, talk about Ubuntu and we say, people, that a person is a person because of other people. So the people around you contribute to who you are. And if everybody around you is traumatized and suffering and addicted and distracted, that affects how you see yourself. And you see that being perpetuated from one generation to the next. And it's very, very difficult for people to get out of that pattern without consciously thinking about changing that pattern. So I think it was a big, for me as an observer, as a child, watching people go through these motions and just carrying on the same trajectory from one generation to the next. It was very, very important for me to see what was happening and how we could change that. And I think the biggest thing is about our internal stories. Yeah, we inherit stories from everybody else, but we also have the power to change the way we think about ourselves. And the more you learn and connect with yourself, the more, you need to be able to integrate your experiences, like all the trauma that happened to you, the things that you saw, the violence that you saw, the injustice that you saw. It's about making sense of it in a meaningful way and using that to do something about it. So it's also very much about our archetypes, right? I mean, I'm just going to mention three here. Like, what we see very much in society is that we have these three archetypes, basically, right? The martyr archetype. A lot of women I see with this, where they become, they have a lot of burnout because they want to do everything for everyone else in their lives, and they neglect themselves. And we've seen our mothers and our grandmothers doing this, and that's how we learn from them. And until, I also experienced burnout because I was trying to do everything, be a mother, be a wife, have a corporate career. And I ended up in the hospital as well, with burnout. And I think when you get to that point, a lot of women are dealing with that now. Then you realize something's wrong with these stories that we're telling ourselves about how we should be. You know, there's no prize for killing yourself and destroying yourself in the process. And the other one I see very, very much especially in South Africa, is this victim archetype, right? About this blame game. It's like, yeah, everything's legacy of apartheid. Yeah, we know the past did a number on us. We had a lot of things happen to us that were not our fault, but we are not powerless to change that. You cannot just sit around and not take responsibility for your life and change things for the better. So I think for me, the most important thing is about becoming your sovereign self, right? The sovereign archetype is being the leader, the visionary, having the confidence to envision something different than what you experience. Ask what else is out there, to dream big, to be optimistic, um, to guide yourself first, and then other people around you about what you want to change in your life, how you want the future to be that is different from what you've experienced in the past. And I think that is where the stories in your mind, from what you learned and heard from in the past, where you are today and where we're going to be tomorrow, really interconnect.
Well, we'll come back to the story again because that is very, very important. Of course, you know that we are heavy on storytelling here because I see it to be fundamental. In fact, 2 days ago, we organized a webinar where we talked about the neuroscience and human behavior in storytelling. So we brought in 5 neuroscientists to talk about it, and it was really very fascinating how our brain works in terms of story that we tell ourselves, and also the one we tell other people. So we'll come back to that. That is going to be very important, and also your perspective on that. Just now, you were making mention of epigenetic trauma, and I think that is how you refer to it. Of course, also because you are coming from the background of psychology, that will also be very important for us to understand how you describe that, how you explain that. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, so I think starting with intergenerational trauma, a lot of the behaviors and patterns that let's look at trauma itself, right? When something traumatic happens to you or your environment is very difficult to survive in, you adapt to survive it. So the patterns that you create and the different kinds of behaviors that you have is for you to survive. That is the whole job of your ego and your soul, right? To help you to survive the situation that you find yourself in. And you find the next generation, you either teach them that or they learn from being around you, or epigenetically gets transferred to have these skills activated or these behavior patterns activated in them so that they can survive the same environment, right? It's a very intelligent function for you to be able to do that, but it's also kind of an unconscious thing, right? And what happens is over time, even though the environment may have changed, yes, apartheid is over, we're not being threatened with violence anymore, we don't have to live like that anymore, we still have those adaptations about we are living in this very restrictive, difficult situation, and we have these patterns of behaviors and thinking and being that are made for survival in the previous situation. But the situation has changed, but we haven't changed. So we have to consciously actually look at our behaviors and our patterns and change that and turn those things off and adapt to a new way of living. So it takes a lot of conscious reflection and understanding and really behavior change and telling yourself the story that is different. We don't tell ourselves the same stories from the past anymore. We have to change what we tell ourselves and who we are and how we are.
Now we sort of have a cycle that is repeating itself, no? Like a snake, a big snake that is turning around, biting its own tail, but you are already moving around in a circle. Now, how do we break that circle? Say maybe, for example, we don't like it, no? In that maybe we don't like what is happening. Okay, let's say Africa, for example, because we have peculiar problem related to leadership, the society, and then producing the leadership that they get, and those leaders produce the society that they get, and it remains in a cycle. We don't like it, we complain about it, but sometimes we don't take enough action to change it because we believe that the politician that we have elected is going to change it. But if they are happy about it, they're not going to change it. So they give the situation that sort of lead to a situation that will produce other people that look like them. Therefore, we are in this circle. How do we break that circle?
Yeah, so a lot of times you find also people complaining about stuff, right? They just complain, and they don't actually do anything. They don't actually solve the problem, but they just want someone to listen to them complaining. And the thing is, you get comfortable there as well. So you don't really change things unless you're really uncomfortable and you can't live with it anymore. So even when you, for example, on the brink of burnout, you don't change your life until you actually have the burnout and you cannot function anymore. So when things get really uncomfortable, then you want to change, then you want to have a revolution, then you want to react. And sometimes it's a violent reaction. But on the other hand, if you are a conscious, reflective person who's in touch with yourself, and you don't want to wait for that to happen in your life. You are constantly making changes about how you live and how you do things, and you do things intentionally. Then those are two different ways of getting the change to happen. Either you do it intentionally or it happens to you out of necessity. So you will find that in society, people are pretty lazy to take anything any drastic action. Only when it really affects them, like you saw the situation in Kenya, what happened, only when it really affects their survival and they're really put in a difficult place that they cannot do anything else, then they will react. Otherwise, they will just let it slide and it will carry on and carry on in the same way.
Okay, you help me now, Zahara. Looking at it from the point of view of psychology, is it how do we explain the fact that somebody is suffering and is not taking action about that? So what I'm trying to understand there is that, is it more costly to take action? Of course, taking action now means that you suffer, but after the suffering, you will be better. Okay, let me give you a clear example. Of course, what is happening in South Africa is happening in many other African countries. Okay, let's use Nigeria, for example. I'm sure that, of course, maybe you understand a bit what is happening in Nigeria too. In that a lot of people, millions of people, more than 220 million people are suffering. Okay, not all of them, but at least more than 99% of the people are suffering. And they have a system that is not working for them, or working for us. Let me say that because I'm from Nigeria, no? But we don't seem to do enough to change that situation. Perhaps we are afraid that maybe if we don't take action, maybe something is going to happen to us. But what is us? Do we need to sacrifice the pleasure that we have now so that we don't have the pleasure, we will have the suffering? But this suffering is going to end because we will take the ultimate price for that, in that we will put an end to it, or we will wait, continue to suffer for eternity, because the system is never going to change until we change it. So looking at it from the point of view of psychology, why is it difficult for us to take the suffering one time? We just accumulate the suffering so that we just go, I don't know, call it a revolution, whatever you want, but so that we can end the system that is oppressive, so that we can have we will build up a new system. There was a poem I read when I was in secondary school. I think the poem was called New Year Eve. And this poem actually started by saying, a year is born, a year is dead. That literally, that for something to happen, something need to give way. Okay, look at it like maybe a chick that is inside the egg. If you are too comfortable, you will die. That is just the rule of life. If you don't want to die, you will break the eggshell. And breaking the eggshell is not easy. So this is what I'm trying to look at the suffering, that you will really suffer so much, but for a moment. After that moment, you will have life. But if you don't want to take that hard suffering, that instant harshness, where maybe there is no food, no road, the economy is blocked. Nothing is happening, but after that, there will be life.
So I think there's also something that we missed here, right? So if we're looking at Africa or the global South in general, there's been a lot of trauma. If you look at slavery, if you look at colonization, if you look at apartheid, if you look at all the genocides that have happened, the people are inherently traumatized, right? And trauma disconnects you. It disconnects you from yourself, from your experiences, from your emotion. And you find everybody's just distracted and disconnected and just carrying on autopilot, right? They're not really consciously living their lives. And they've developed certain behaviors and ways of being that keeps them small, right? Because you have to lose parts of yourself during those traumatic periods to survive those situations. And it becomes part of our culture, to not question, to not look people in the eye, to not stand in your own power, right? It's an abusive situation, and anybody who's been through abuse will have a similar kind of experience. They will know this experience of self-loss and soul loss. And you end up with communities of people who are struggling to survive, living like zombies, disconnected from themselves, distracted by everything, overworking and never really getting anywhere. And you'll find a lot of these communities also have to deal with addiction and substance abuse, poverty. It's not just because of the lack of money. Africa has like the most resources and abundance on the planet. But it's this powerlessness of the people that leaves them in the situation where they don't do anything about it. So the thing is, you have to step out of that victim mode and become your sovereign self. You've got to integrate back, you know, into your whole self for you to be able to lead in your life and take different actions that will lead to different consequences and different outcomes. Because if you don't do that, we end up just perpetuating the oppression that has always been there. If we are stuck in our old ways and we don't have sovereignty, we believe and accept harmful practices, whether it's from the politicians or the governments or whoever it is. We accept unfair treatment. We accept to be treated like less because we don't believe we are more, because we've been so conditioned to believe that we are little, we are less. Even coming to Europe for me was such an eye-opener about all the stories we hear about how great Europe is and how great America is and how great everywhere else is. But then when you hear it, then you realize how great Africa is. But nobody's telling them that, you know? So we need to really empower ourselves if we want to be able to change our future, if we want to change the situation there. And we have to stop listening to the stories from other people about who Africans are.
Thank you for that. But I have a curiosity there, Zahara. Is it possible that somebody have understood this behavior, have studied it and implement it, knowing that this is the way the people are going to react, and the people therefore react, and the system is sort of feeding on itself, like the African people therefore become like a kind of simulation in the game of another person, so that we are just like rats that are running around in a circle. But this is a game that somebody have designed for us. Is it possible that somebody is enjoying this suffering because that we are playing according to their rules?
Yeah, the game is called capitalism, so it thrives on the suffering of the downtrodden. So I think you wouldn't have the situation if people weren't motivated by greed, by money, by building businesses that exploit resources and people. If everything was according to the way we originally lived with our indigenous wisdom and respecting everything, you wouldn't have this problem. But because this situation creating this inequality, these injustices benefit certain people, they will do everything in their power to perpetuate it. So we have to be more conscious of who we buy from, what we support, what we agree to, even as designers, as people in technology, what we build, who we build it for, what we're contributing to long term. It's not just about a daily job and earning money. It's about really what are we building for the future? What are we perpetuating? What injustices are we contributing to? I think people don't think about that enough. It is a game, and that's what the game is.
All right. Now let's look at some of the things that could be maybe like a solution. No, that you mentioned self-love before. No, because I believe that we don't love ourselves enough. That is why we endure the suffering, hoping that the system will change. Now, I look at it like a relationship that exists between the abuser and the abused. The Iranians' idea that the person that is abusing me is going to stop one day. Therefore, let me just endure until that moment that he or she stops. Only that the abuser come to understand that you are not going to resist, so it's going to continue the abuse. Therefore, the abuse is never going to stop. But if you come to love yourself to the point that you understand that you have a dignity, that you equally deserve a right, that you equally deserve life, you will fight for it. But if you fight for it, what is going to happen? I think it goes back to what I was saying before, that you are going to suffer if you are fighting. But you will not suffer for eternity. You will suffer instantly. But after that suffering, you will be free. In my place, in Esa, with the south of Nigeria, it is said that meaning before the day break, before you see the light, you need to pass through a very thick darkness. That darkness is what I'm talking about. If you are afraid of passing through that darkness, you will never see the light. It's like you are in a tunnel, or maybe you want to pass through a tunnel to get to the other side of it. If you don't pass through the tunnel and whatever that tunnel represents, you cannot see the other side of it. So for you to go to that tunnel, you need to have a belief in yourself that you deserve it, that you are not going to be saved by anybody or anything. You are going to save yourself. Tell me about that self-love.
Yeah, I think it's, when you look at it like that as well, it's about maybe the dark night of the soul, right? When you're on autopilot and you're living this life as one of the rats running around in a circle, eventually you come to a point where your life breaks down, where you had enough and you can't function anymore. And really you question everything about who you are and what you're doing and what your purpose is. And then you have to really embrace that. You have to go through that. You have to question everything. You have to ask yourself these deeper questions of what your purpose is. Because you're a soul, you're a being, you have inherent value that people have told you you don't have, right? And I think that is a fundamental problem, is that you forget your worth, you forget who you are, you forget your purpose on this planet as a steward of life on this planet. We become so disconnected by this belief that we are nothing and we are nobody and we don't have value. And that we try to make up that value by working and doing things and working for other people and building a career, but creating more disconnection in our lives. So yes, you have to pass through this darkness to really be able to see the light and embrace your inherent value, your worth as a human being, and then connect back with yourself, with your environment, with your culture, with your language, all the things that were taken away from you, really, for you to be able to integrate back into your full human self. And I think the problem, even especially in Africa with the colonization and all of the things we have to enjoy, is that all of those things were stripped from us. We never really integrated everything back into ourselves. So you have entire generations, multiple generations of people who are disconnected, ashamed of themselves. They don't know their worth, they don't know their value, and they just find their value in working. The hardest working people, they have 3-4 jobs just to survive, just to live, but they don't really create success out of that, and it's not just individual success defined by Western standards. It's about, the community, the wealth of the community, the well-being of the community, everything around us that's interconnected. It used to be thriving and now it's all, you can just see what's happening on the planet, right? So yeah, you have to go through that initial phase of a breakdown and understand that the current way of living is not working, for you to question it and then to revolt against it.
If you were to look at the situation that we have in Africa, and again, of course, we can never be tired of talking about that, because that is our continent, that is where we are coming from. If you were an experiment, for how long can the people take before it is too much? And they will say, because I don't believe that a salvation is going to come from anywhere. The only salvation in Africa is going to come from the African people. That is when it gets to the time that they say, okay, it's no more, it's too much.
Yes.
I also believe doing a lot of analysis, because here I do a lot of interviews. I've done more than 1,000 interviews with people, and I'm really just starting. To the point that even if we were to say, let's fight in Africa, And maybe the person that we're going to fight are the European, for example, or the Americans. I don't think those one really want to fight us to the point of exterminating us, because the game is not going to work like that. What they just need to understand is that we are ready to defend our value. Now they will negotiate. But we are not standing anything. We are just telling them, hey, do whatever you like, but at least give us a little thing from the one that you have stolen from us. We don't negotiate anything. And let's put us in a precarious situation. I think we need to stand guard in Africa as Africans and tell the person that is coming in, are you a friend or an enemy? If you are an enemy, that is a price to pay. If you are a friend, this is how we work, operate here. Of course, this is again going to go to the egg, to the chick inside the egg, breaking the shell. It's going to be troubling. Everywhere is going to be sort of chaotic, or maybe there's going to be disturbances in the whole of the continent, maybe. But it's not going to continue like that forever. After that, there's going to be an order. If Africa was an experiment, for how long will the people tolerate before they say it is too much for them and they change the situation?
It's like boiling a frog, right? I mean, when does a frog jump out of the pot? If you really, increase the temperature really slowly, the frog will never know it's dying. So the same thing here. It's like you're being indoctrinated, you're being dehumanized over time. You don't realize your value, your self-worth has been eroded. You don't realize what the problem is. It's more a war of the mind. We have to decolonize our minds first. We have to create inherent worth in the next generation. So I think it's, a lot of time has been wasted. A lot of generations have been damaged, but the new generations, I mean, Africa has the youngest median age and the largest population on the planet. And this is the fundamental problem. These young people growing up now don't understand their worth. And if we don't help them to see themselves and believe in themselves and know what they're worth and see themselves connected to their environment and their country and their culture and be the protectors of that, then we have lost the war before we even started. It's a war on the minds of the youth. So that is where we need to start. So the experiment is already there about the media and the stories and the things that we hear about who we are and how we are and what we're supposed to be. We don't need to strive to Western ideals. We don't need to build the next Amazon. We don't need Silicon Valley startups all over Africa, draining the economy. We need different solutions that are actually here to help us. We need those solutions from the people who live here. So we need to empower people, to start loving themselves, to understanding themselves, to know their worth. And you're not going to get that from anybody outside of Africa telling you what you're worth. They're always going to degrade you and bring you down so that they can exploit you, which has been historically the case.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. This afternoon, actually, we're going to be doing a live session with a professor of transpersonal psychology on Facebook Live. And it's going to be about trauma. And we had already talked about it last week. We're going to talk about it today. I was also going to talk about it a couple of weeks to come. In that we're looking at how he basically says that African leaders are traumatized, that they are operating from the point of view of trauma.
Yes.
That is why their behavior cannot be rationally explained, because it's also a psychologist, no? Because now, this is where it becomes a little bit dangerous. If the person that is ruling you is not mature enough to even rule his or herself, and he's the one that we are looking up to, because the way that leadership is structured is that if you have a leader who is leading you, if he's leading you to the hole, you will still follow him because he's your leader. You sort of have volunteer your power and saddle this individual without your power. If you don't respect him, you are not respecting yourself. There was a film that was made in Nigeria at one time. So there was this corrupt king. There is this individual who usually sings for the kings. When there is a good king, he sings for him. But when there is a bad king, there was this bad king, he was also singing for him. Now somebody come to ask him, but can't you see this is a bad person? He said, I am not singing for him. I am singing for the throne. So the throne is the collective power of the people. It is for the interest of the people that they should look for the best among them to sit on the throne. Because if you put a fool there, everybody will become fool. If you put what the Nigerian people call mumu, all the people will become mumu. If you put an intelligent person, everybody suddenly become intelligent because you volunteer a part of, because this is something that has been happening for thousands of years, leadership. That when you have somebody at that throne, that person represents you. Whatever the person does reflect, you cannot hide from that. If that person is traumatized and is the one really ruling you, governing you, dictative, signing the contract, because when the Chinese want to sign a contract with Nigeria, you don't call the ordinary people to come and study the contract. They send it to Abuja or wherever the institution is. Only a few people have access to that document. What if those people don't even understand the content of that document? They will still sign it because the Nigerian people volunteer that power and give it to them as their leaders. Does that have any consequence?
Yeah, I mean, we see that all over Africa, right? Because of the same situation. Even in South Africa, we have a lot of corruption, and a lot of our leaders are operating from a place of survival mode and scarcity because, yes, they didn't have things when they were growing up during apartheid, whatever. Things were scarce. They didn't have opportunities. Now they kind of hoard everything for themselves and they take it away from the people they're supposed to be serving. So they're not functioning from a holistic point of view. They're not functioning from a very well integrated, healed, you know, uh, starting point. So yes, they are traumatized people, but also we keep voting for these people because maybe we are a traumatized society that identifies with them, you know. But I feel that will change in the next generation. The next generation is more open. They're not so closed. They understand what trauma is. They are dealing with it. They're not like us. So hopefully in the coming generations, things will change and they will take over and they will do things properly and they will be connected to their communities and the environment and wherever they serve and the natural resources that we are supposed to be protecting and not over exploiting and destroying the environment. So I see that in the future that might change, that is going to change, but we also can help that to happen and maybe get there faster by allowing that to happen. Instead of putting people who are 90 years old, 80 years old in power who are not going to change their way of thinking and not going to do their healing journey right now. I mean, they are going to always be operating from the past and what their traumatic experiences are. That's not going to change.
Coming back to the solution, how maybe we can empower the youth. Because I also believe that Africans have a huge opportunity looking at the time that we are living in today, in the sense that the economy that we have, the global economy, have shifted from being merely physical to digital, no? And that is also have to do with the information, and that also have to do with the tools of the age, which is technology and all of that. And that also is in favor of younger generation because you can't give those tools to older people. They don't know how to operate it. So, and because African demography is dominated by young people, a huge proportion of the African population is younger people of less than 35. That means now that those people that play the game, so they are going to play into the future. So that, like you were saying before, they will understand that this is their country, their countries and their land to protect, and they will be able to write themselves into the future using the power of the day, which is technology. And you are in technology. What do you see there, looking at the potential that lives in Africa? I call it potential.
Yeah, so I think that the fundamental problem is that we try to emulate the West and Silicon Valley and all those tech startups, and we create more problems. So especially when it comes to, I worked with a lot of companies as a consultant who come to Africa with the solutions from the West, and I just try to implement it here. And that doesn't work because we are a different community, different needs, different way of living. So it usually ends up a failure and they waste a lot of money. What we need is for people who are connected to their communities, the young people who are okay with technology, to actually start creating those solutions and rewriting their own stories about how things need to be. Instead of looking to the West and trying to emulate them, they need to create solutions in Africa for the African people, right? They need to really be confident about themselves and their abilities. And I know historically they didn't have access to the education that they needed to do these things. And the education system, even now, is out of date for the things that we need. So we need to also look at that, right? It's not just about sharing knowledge anymore. It's not just about, being able to do maths and science and all these individual topics, because that also doesn't serve us, right? It's a very reductionistic way of looking at the world. Africa has this holistic way of doing things and being, and we need an education system that helps us perpetuate that and integrate that into the future. So it's very much about how to be human, how to live with the environment, how to use our culture, our indigenous knowledge, how to integrate all of these things with technology and build the solutions that we want. And I think the fundamental thing is about also creating solutions that bridge the gap. So we missed a lot of things. We don't have a lot of infrastructure. We don't have a lot of services that are available to a lot of people, whether it's psychology or medical or anything. Africa has a problem with everything, right? If you look at mental health, there's not enough psychologists or doctors for people to access. Technology can help us fill that gap, especially with AI. We can build solutions that can help more people than ever before. But we need those solutions to be built for the people that we are serving, right? In a way that will actually help them, that in a way that they need. So we need to build it with those people to develop them. But if you use, a paradigm from the Western world for Africans, they're not creating a solution for Africans. It doesn't really serve us in the long run. It tries to change us into something that we are not. So we really need to find a way of working with the people to use technology to create, empower them. So it's about filling the gaps using technology, but also working really with the people in a connected way and empowering them. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of room for exploitation if people don't really take their position and empower themselves. There's a lot of companies, global corporates waiting to come into Africa and get a foothold here because this is a very fertile ground and it's going to be one of the most booming economies in the next 10 years.
All right, economy and business too. And we seem to understand the fact that where you can function as an entrepreneur or as somebody who is a business is where there is problem. And because problem is opportunity for entrepreneur, in that essentially you are providing solution to people's problem. If there are no problem, then you don't have anything to do. What if we could reframe it like that in Africa, that, okay, now we don't have enough infrastructure. Okay, those are mega projects that the state will need to take care of, but maybe we can also have a way of running it. In that, what if people, let's say, for example, we identify that we have problem of psychologists. No, we don't have enough. What if people organize training to build up psychology to help them to think? When you do that, of course, you don't do that for free. You will make money. What if people, maybe, for example, talking about no access to books to read, no, or devices to read books. And we understand that today you can write code that translate things. You see, I see a lot of potential here. Look, using technology, for example. Because if we rewrite, okay, let me go back to what you were saying before, that we can change the narrative. Because if we see it from the way that somebody that is far away look at it, it might be full of problems. But if we see those problems as opportunity for us to cash on, then we can find a solution. But there is a difference. There's a difference between African finding a solution to African problem as entrepreneur, and European finding a solution to that same problem coming to Africa. It's not the same. Okay, let me give you a clear example. I was saying in 2010, I wrote a book that I titled "That Development in Africa, My Hands Are Clean." Then at the point, I was making reference to the Niger Delta of Nigeria and the relationship that they have with the multinational corporation in the Niger Delta, talking of Shell BP and the rest of them. There is also Eni, which is the Italian company operating in the Niger Delta. Now, what is the problem? The problem is that because many of these companies coming from Europe are not seeing Niger Delta as a place to defend, they can do whatever they like, destroying the land for over 21 million people. Now, my
Mhm.
thesis in that space on the project, on the research was, what if Share BP, for example, was a company owned by people from the Niger Delta? Would they do the same thing that they are doing there? Of course, they cannot do that because this is your land, these are your people. What
Yeah.
if Share BP discover oil in Europe? You see, Norway also have a lot of oil, but to extract that oil, they don't destroy the land. They don't destroy the people, their infrastructure, their livelihood, their ecosystem. This is to say that except you are conscious of what you are doing in relation with other people, you can take advantage of them, do whatever you like. But if we as a people are the one that are in charge in terms of creating businesses, finding solutions to our problem, we will be conscious knowing that if we mess up the system, we are messing up ourselves.
Yeah, I think that is a fundamental problem, right? Instead of empowering African people to become owners, to become leaders, to become entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, and take the lead in that, I think the rest of the world really sees them as cheap labor a lot of the times, working on mines, working here, working there in factories, whatever. That's the problem. You don't have ownership, you don't have power, you don't have a say in your own life, in your own environment, in your own country, because you are not regarded as a sovereign being. You're not given the power to do that. And I think that is the fundamental problem. And the fact that they took away education legally or whatever, during apartheid, you weren't allowed to study certain things. You weren't allowed to become empowered. You weren't allowed to become doctors or whatever, right? You were taught how to be a gardener. So that disempowerment is what is perpetuated. The mindset that you cannot do that, you cannot become a leader, you cannot become an entrepreneur. That is what is holding us back. So when you overcome that, you can become the kind of people that takes ownership of the land, of the resources, of your community, of the problems that you're facing and create solutions for it. So it's very much about personal power of the people to create solutions for their own people in a way that is, you know, uh, works for everybody,
All
basically.
right, personal power. And I think that is something that is sort of prevalent in your work. Sovereignty, democracy. We also bridged that or maybe added that to technology because you are also in technology, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How much democracy do we really have in the technological area in the sense that because now we look at technology as something that people can access and use, no? And of course, you need tools to be able to operate on it. But of course, if you are talking of AI, that is the certain access that a lot of people can have access to today. Okay, access. How much access do Africans have to technology if they want to leverage it for their own situation?
So I think the access is different to different kinds of technology in different parts of the world, right? So if I look at Europe, yeah, it's very different from what's happening in Africa. In Africa, it's all mobile. Even if you look at the Southeast Asia, same most developing countries, it's very much mobile. So you have access to mobile technology, which actually not a big problem, but it can help you really to reach more people. I think more people have cell phones there than they do here. We have more access to the internet there than actually in parts of Europe. It's very strange. We have high-speed internet in South Africa that we don't actually have here where I am right now. So there's a lot of difference in the way we view technology. But looking at mobile technology, there's different kinds of solutions that we're going to build. And if you look at the solutions that in tech that are being built in other parts of the world, yeah, it's not built for Africa. It's not built for the developing countries because they have a different context, different ambitions, different ways of doing things, and different access to the infrastructure, right? So the problem is the people in Africa with what they have access to need to come up with more creative solutions. They need to, yeah, be empowered to use what they have, the access that they have to create solutions. And the solution is always not always an app or new technology or completely just use technology and be devoid of other things. It has to be very balanced. I don't think the future is about just technology. It's very much about being human. That is the fundamental problem that we lack in all these other tech companies. They don't know the effect, or they don't care about the effect that the technology that they're building is having on the people and the community and the environments. They don't care about it. They don't take that into consideration. The long-term vision they have doesn't include that. It's always about money and profit and what they can gain out of it and how much they can exploit out of it, because their fundamental premise of building a business is to create profit and exploit resources. But in Africa, it should be the opposite way around. We're not here to destroy the place where we live. We have all these resources, we have access to technology, but we need to create holistic solutions that benefit everybody, including the environment. So it's not always about technology. It's about using technology as a tool to help us create the things that we don't have.
All right. Technology as a tool to create the thing that we don't have. And of course, there are a lot of things that we don't have in Africa. I remember one time I was talking to a programmer. They were looking at the problem of light, for example. And they were also looking at light energy, I was saying that we're looking at the stage that we have got it to in the world today, there is no reason why people should be in darkness in Africa. Okay, people are in darkness in Africa. In Nigeria, for example, over 220 million people, we are literally in darkness. We have about, I think, 4,000 megawatts of electricity for a country that is 3 times the size of Italy. 220 million people. How can you power an economy with 4,000 megawatts of electricity? That cannot even power a state. Okay, I say, okay, why don't we find a solution? Let's see, can we use AI for this? Because I think what the AI is doing is gathering information. And all this information, they are available. Nothing is new. Nothing is new. Energy. How do we find a problem to this energy? Okay, maybe we might not be able to build the mega structure. In fact, we might not necessarily need the mega structure. Maybe we need the smaller section, the smaller structure where a village can have their own power and they can be autonomous if possible. Is there a way AI can help us in that? Actually, where I'm going here is, how do you see the practical use of AI or modern technology in solving African problems, since we are looking at African problems?
Yeah, so AI can do anything basically, right? I mean, we always say, yeah, AI is not good enough. It's, can't replace humans. But if you look around, humans are not that smart anymore, right? And the technology, I mean, look at the stupid decisions that they make about everything, right? About where to build, what to build, how to create things, what the politicians do. And AI could do a better job, right?
Absolutely.
To be honest. So you could use AI for anything, for managing patients, for managing electricity, for managing food supply, for everything, for farming, for creating conducive conditions for growing things, for anything you want to think about. So the problem is that we are maybe not focusing on the problems that we have to solve them. We don't focus, because a lot of times we look at the tech companies, like I said, they care about profit. They don't care about your problem, especially in Africa. They will only come in here with their AI solutions if they feel like they can make a lot of money out of it. So we need to flip it around. We need to use AI to solve our own problems. We need the communities to come together, with the knowledge and the technology and the different stakeholders and solve the problem using technology. That is how it should be. Yes, create autonomous smart villages or whatever you need to solve your own problems, to fulfill your own needs so that you can be self-sufficient. And it's not other companies coming in here and say, yes, there's a problem in Africa. Let's build something so we can make a lot of money out of them and then destroy the entire community in the process.
Thank you for that.
So it's about the mindset of, taking leadership and finding a solution for your own problems instead of waiting for someone to come and save you.
Yeah, that's all right. Talking of some of these practical problems, I think we need to use AI to solve one of the problems that we often complain about. For example, the literacy problem, that there is not a lot of materials for education in Africa. This is why, of course, we need to borrow books from Europe to schools in Africa, where we don't really need that. But what if we could use maybe modern technology to digitize the mind of the people and put it and make it available for people to have access to? Okay, what do I mean by that? There is a saying that when an elder died in Africa, a library is burned down. But what that actually means is that the experience of that person who has been living for several years is not documented. So we just allow him to die like that. He died with the knowledge. So what if we could use AI to sometimes go to meet elders like that and just ask questions, a series of questions, and document it, put it down, because people are going to benefit from that. There is a spiritual angle to this that I am not going into just now, but I want to say that it is fundamentally important that we learn what our ancestors have gone through, because our code of moving into the future is hidden in the past. It's not in the future, it's in the past. It's not even in the present, because in the present, we don't know it. For us to know, we need to look backward. All right, now, the manuscript of Timbuktu is between 400,000 to about 1 million manuscripts. The other day, I was talking to, I think, a member of a UNESCO, somebody that's working in the UNESCO. I was asking, why don't people invest money? Well, maybe the United Nations, of course, I don't know, to digitize those books, those manuscripts. More than 400,000 to 1 million copies of manuscript. Are we waiting to hear that one day they burn it down, then we'll say, we should have done that? You see, the Library of Alexandria was burned down. And now we are saying, okay, if we have had access to that, but now we have access to over 400,000 manuscripts. I'm not using that one as an example, because if we want to look at because if you look at the buildings in Africa sometime, we also need to ask ourselves, this beauty, does it reflect what we really want as a society? Can we build something more durable, less expensive, better for the people, more habitable, easier to maintain, and all of that? But how do we know all this if we don't know the building that have been here before? For example, in central Nigeria, there is a culture known as a Nonk culture. Of course, Nonk is named after a Nonk village in central Nigeria, Jos. One day, I was interviewing a head professor in the University of Jos. That I was asking him, how do you design the Nigeria buildings? Because if you were to go up in the space and look at the building, of course, if you move a little bit down, because if you are too far, you cannot see it. You look at the building. If you look at the building in Switzerland, you know that these are buildings in Switzerland. You don't mistake that with what you are going to find in Germany, or maybe what you are going to find in the United States. Every country needs a signature of who they are. In Nigeria, for example, every person imports their own signature of building. Okay, now, I know this might be, to some people, this might be trivia, but it's not that trivia. We are talking of building our identity, defining who we are. This also maybe have to do with the language. The Nigerian so-called language, in terms of the English that we speak, is called the Pidgin English. Nobody in Nigeria is bothered on to say, let's make it official that this is the Nigerian language, so that we can write dictionaries with it. We can use it to teach our children from primary 1. They start to speak this so-called Pidgin English, because that is their language. It is not Pidgin English. This is the Nigerian language. Nobody else speaks this language in the world. It's Nigerian language. Why are we relegating it to the pigeons? Are we pigeons? So I'm saying that there are a lot of these trivial things that we need to be able to build ourselves in the world, so that we can be proud of who we are. Because if we're not proud of who we are, we cannot defend ourselves. I don't know if I'm overstepping it here. I don't know if it even make any sense to you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. This is the fundamental thing. If you don't step into your sovereign self, you don't, accept your power, you don't know what your values are, and how are you going to create anything of value to you? So fundamentally, yeah, you're speaking the truth. When it comes to language, yeah, literacy was always an issue, because I think in a lot of cultures in Africa, it was a very oral thing. We didn't have books, obviously, because of the way we lived. I mean, running around and doing things. Nobody's sitting in the classroom writing in a book. They were out living life, doing things in the fields, whatever. And this is a problem in many countries where the language is not developed in a way that is used or taught in schools, so that it hinders the progress as you go further up, right? But with AI and technology, there's a lot of projects going on that can actually document these, artifacts, these stories, these manuscripts, the people's life stories in a in different ways, using voice, using video, using many different ways of collecting the data. But the problem is also, who is paying for this? Right? When African people invest in their own things, it will prosper. But nobody from Europe cares about your problem here, right? I mean, they're not going to give you money to go and build something for yourself. Why would they, right? Because you got so many entrepreneurs in Africa. Ask them, we need to create more entrepreneurs who invest back in their communities and build these things for the communities, so that the rest of the community can also start to prosper. It's about giving back. It's about being connected to your roots, where you came from, instead of being ashamed and trying to become European when you're Black. So you need to invest in your own things.
Thank you so much for that. Uh, I wanted to spend some few words on decolonization, because I think that is one of the terms that I actually said we're going to talk about. Okay, maybe not extensively, but of course, I think this is something that is also important to you. What do you mean by that term?
Yeah, like you said, you have to borrow books from Europe because we don't have a lot of books here. So even when we were growing up, a lot of the things we were taught, even in universities, that the books that we read, the education that we were given is not from ourselves. It's from a different country. It's from a different continent. It's about them inputting their way of thinking and their paradigms and their beliefs and their values into our minds and taking away what we inherently have. So it's about them colonizing the minds, not just physically colonizing the countries. So for me, decolonizing our future, because if we don't really get rid of that, artificial ways of thinking and being and doing, we're going to end up in a place where we don't really want to be. So we need to first think about, yeah, returning to our own selves, valuing our own things, reauthoring our identities, seeing our lives from our own perspectives and not just taking in what was put into us from the media, from school, from the education systems, from the stories that we heard about ourselves through the people who colonized us, who oppressed us. It's a very academic, even academia is very very biased in everything, right? So we need to think about the stories that we tell ourselves and all the things we learned and ask ourselves where it came from. Where do those ideas come from? Is it something that is part of our culture, our values, the things that we hold dear? Like the business, where we create businesses, where we are taught to do that in university. It doesn't fit well with, creating businesses that actually can heal the planet. It's very much about exploitation. It's not endemic to this region, right? So we really have to take away the things that destroy us and were meant or planted or whatever, as we talked about previously about part of the game that was somebody's experiment to destroy us. But I think it's more about empowering yourself and getting rid of all the things that you learned that are not serving you anymore, so that you can really shift your mindset and become more empowered in your own life and have a sense of agency, solving your own problems instead of becoming a victim, taking control of things, healing yourself, healing the community, all the things of the past, the environment, being connected to everything around you and really revitalizing your own culture, the things that were taken from you, your language, your culture, your beliefs, your traditions, your ancient wisdom, all of those things that we're told were not valuable. For you to create a good future that works for you, for your community and the people around you, your country, your continent, you really have to go back to your roots and unlearn all of those things that were, put into your brain by someone else.
So you're saying that we need to brainwash our brain for good. Let it turn. Let's unlearn those things that are unhealthy for us. You see, I believe that if we were to really take action, the right action, we will free ourselves. Because nobody is really coming. Nobody is coming to save us. We haven't yet realized it. That is why we are waiting. In my play, it said that, that is, if you have nobody waiting for you, have no reason waiting. Keep moving. Because you don't have any reason. Why are you wasting time? All right, Zahara. Now, say you are designing a program for decolonization because you are interested in the future. You want a different kind of future. The future is something important that, okay, we might not have time to go into today, but that is also very important because in this podcast, sometimes we really go very deep on spirituality because it's not just all here. It's deeper than what is here, no? Okay, that is by the way. So maybe, for example, you are looking to the future. You want to help people to believe in themselves and design a different kind of system. Tell me, what are some of the steps that you would put in place? Tell me also, what are some of the value that you would put in place to make sure that we are headed toward a future where the future Africans will be proud of who they are and able to build the continent that they want. They want, not the one that will please other people.
So yeah, I've been doing some research, I think, on my own. It's very much about integrating futures thinking, narrative therapy, and regenerative psychology, right? About really working on people's minds and decolonizing the mind. I think it's fundamental to the stories that we create about our lives and who we are, how we want to be in the future. If we want to create a world that works for everyone, we keep hearing this, but if people are not thinking straight, if they are not in their element, if they are not in their empowered self, they are not going to create empowered futures. They're not going to create visions for themselves that work in a way that is helpful to them. So I think regenerative psychology is a more integrated approach to healing the human. It's about integrating traditional principles and practices and honoring the mind, the body, the spirit, your emotions, your relations, your community, the environment, all of those things together, right? Enabling deep growth and sustainable transformation. And I think with traditional psychology, we really miss that. It's always about dealing with symptoms and also, they never give you solutions to anything. They just want to listen to you talk. And it's also a business model, right? You go there for sessions and they never actually solve any problem, right? So for me, it's very much about, yeah, looking at the human in a holistic way, in their environment, in their society, as a whole human being, all aspects, all dimensions of yourself, and also then looking at, the words that you use, the stories that you tell yourself, the things that happened in the past or happening in the present, or things that you want to happen in the future, and how you perceive that and how you talk about it, how you tell yourself things about it. It's about reauthoring the stories that have happened in a way that actually serves you, instead of reliving things that make you a victim or a martyr, helping you to overcome that. So also building a long-term vision, in a way that respects your identity and your needs and those around you. So there's a lot of work that's I've been doing, as a matter of personal interest. I'm not from an academic perspective, because any institution that gets involved usually wants to have control over the results. Um, so it's very much a community thing. So yeah, helping people who have been disadvantaged or marginalized or abused, it helps them to change the way they have been living their lives. So really, I'm working on this as a coaching thing that helps empowers people, maybe on one-to-one session, and really refining that in a way that can in future be used on a much broader scale for people.
Thank you for that. We need that. We need that. Is there any way that we can find traces of South African traditional South African belief or value system in what you do? Which are they?
Yeah, like I said, it's about holistically, like Ubuntu, right? I mean, people are people through other people. So the people around you who contribute to who you are, how you interact with them, the stories that you create in relation with them. It's always about relation. I know, in a Western paradigm, it's very much about, creating different bodies of knowledge, distinct subject areas and distinct disciplines, and you cut away all the connections between things. So it's almost impossible to even have a systemic or holistic way of thinking about things by just bringing them together, because you removed all the connection between things. But here we're looking at really the space between things, how you connect it to other things. And it's very much a community-based approach, right? You can't function on your own. You can't heal on your own, because you didn't get traumatized on your own. You got traumatized in relation with other people. Somebody did something that affected you. So for you to heal, you've got to heal the space between that. So it's a lot about connecting to things, to people, to the planet, everything around you. It's a very community driven thing as compared to the Western way of looking at you as an individual, autonomous, you're pretty much an island on your own and it's all about your success. So this is very much about, yeah, community way of living and being, and understanding that your actions have an impact not just on you, on your life, on your family, but everything around you. So even when we create things, we use technology, we create businesses, we create, we innovate, the things that we create, if we're creating from a place of disconnection, we are going to perpetuate that and exacerbate that through the things that we put out in the world. So even when I work with entrepreneurs who want to create businesses, there's always a certain amount of of personal work that has to go into it, because whatever you're going to put out into the world is going to amplify what you started off with, and you always start with yourself, right? So if you don't do the work and you don't connect to yourself and you don't connect to the community and their needs and the environment and its needs, you are just doing things for yourself, and it's going to have a negative impact on other things.
Thank you so much for that. Now, the narrative. How do you change the narrative? Now you know your story, you know where you are coming from and all of that. You know what have happened to you. How do you reshape that narrative?
Yeah, so this work also goes back to generations, right? So it's about the story that we get passed on from previous generations. Like if you look at, I did a lot of intergenerational work about the women in my family, and you'll see the same patterns, the same behaviors. The people marry the same kind of people. They do the same kind of work. They end up in the same kind of relationships. It's, it's very, very strange, but it's basically the same story that you're telling. Like, this is how it should be. This is how it is. Tradition, culture, whatever you want to call it. It's entrenched behavior patterns and ways of thinking. So once we start looking at how you think about things and what you believe is true and what you learned as how you should be, we analyze those things and we actually redefine them. We kind of reprogram you to think in a different way that is more beneficial, more serving the greater good, instead of destroying you, because just living unconsciously, perpetuating those stories is just going to keep you stuck in that cycle. So you really have to take a step back, analyze what's happening from the past in your own family tree, and really look at what's happening and decide. You have to align with your soul's purpose and really redefine the way you want to go and create a new narrative for the future that is more aligned with your values and your purpose and your consciousness. So from becoming unconscious to really living a very conscious, intentional life.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. So in one few line, what would be your final thought here to conclude the conversation? Then also add how people can find you. That is important.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. You can check out bloomforge.co, where we talk about regeneration stories, about people changing their narratives. And also on my website, zaharachetty.com. So I think the closing thing I would like to say is that, if you don't like what's happening, if you see the problems that are happening in the world, don't, try to distract yourself from it. Just stop and think about how you're contributing to that. What are you actually doing? Are you living an unconscious or a conscious intentional life? So, and what you want to do about that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. This is really powerful. Thank you very much.